Let's do it. Yeah, it sounds good.
I'm super excited about this, by the way.
So we looked at making Japanese wood block prints. So our question that we developed as a group was how do creative artists utilize technology, making Japanese wood block prints worldwide. So some observations that I found throughout the stream was the different tools that they used. They had a microscope that had the camera, and they had multiple cameras that they fiddled with to make sure that they had the proper layout with. And they had the tools that they actually used, the wood, the different chisels, and they had a laptop available. I found it very interesting in the project that the artist himself did not read the chats. Instead, the artist helper read the chats to him. And oftentimes, the helper answered the questions without consulting with the artist. Other types of interactions that I found to be very interesting was the fact that they linked to the blog and there was linked to videos. Other interaction, there was many conversations between viewers themselves on the chat where they may have answered themselves or given links to places to purchase wood. And then at the end of the blog, or I'm sorry, at the end of the video, there was links to support Dave's work, to follow on Facebook. So here's some of my field notes that I had tried to show. And I really found it interesting how they tried to incorporate accessing different technology tools, like the blog, like the video interaction, that they put the links up to other videos. Some other things that I thought was in my notes that stood out to me was, so for one, for example, there was a question at 10:17, or 10 minutes and 17 seconds, that asked about what was the measurement of the blades. And the question was not even answered until 10 minutes and 50 seconds. So I wondered if there was a delay in this since it was being transmitted from Tokyo, or did that just take that long for the helper to recognize that there was a question out there? The other very interesting thing for me was the whole social aspect. I found it interesting that the streamer himself was trying to connect the viewers to his own personal life. He talked a lot about his grandkids. He actually had them try to Skype, even though he had difficulty with that and that wasn't possible. The boys tried to Skype in, and it was found a comical that the mom was yelling at them. They said, "Leave Grandpa alone, he's busy." But the grandpa wanted them. He had encouraged them to do that. And so from that standpoint, I thought that was really interesting. Also, that the streamer, instead of talking about his work at hand, he talked a lot about his visits that he had with his grandsons and the video games that he played with them when he visited. So it was really, he kind of showed his personal side and expressed his love for his family. And he didn't focus so much on step-by-step instruction on how to do the wood blocking work itself. And then another big takeaway that I got from this is that viewers expended their knowledge with live streams and from other viewers. There was definitely this social interaction between the viewers, and other viewers answered their questions at times on where to purchase wood. And some people responded with sarcasm, like a force was the answer. So, I think that even though we were looking at the technology end of things and how that engaged the viewers, I was really taken by surprise as far as the, and we've learned it already, the importance of collaboration and social learning, like that. But this streaming video for me really enforced that, because I felt like the viewers expanded their knowledge and interacted with each other. So social learning is such a vital part of this, instead of just learning coming straight from the Master Dave as the work. That was kind of my take on it.
Okay. Could you guys hear that okay and see it okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Good job.
Like I said, I don't know if I did that. Like I said, I just had pre-recorded it, so I thought, well, we'll just play that. But that was one of my biggest, that I was most surprised about. Like, I guess I went into this expecting like that the streamer would kind of go through step-by-step instructions, and it just really, to me, it was just like the big thing was the social thing for me. You know, the social interaction, the social learning. So.
I was the same way. I thought there'd be more of an explanation. It felt like you're kind of just getting like a slice of life kind of thing, where like that's what they were doing. They're being recorded, but like they weren't really like explaining to us what the steps were. Like everyone in the stream seemed to kind of follow along.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, for me, the interesting thing about the social aspect was I expected to to be able to, and I don't know why I thought this, but I thought I would be able to jump in and be able to get a glimpse of, like you were saying, kind of a step-by-step, this is how you make a wood block. But it wasn't. I was stepping into a community room of hobbyists that were already established. So they already had their common lingo. They already had their common interactions, because they would greet each other as they walked, as they came into the room. They kind of already had some personal inside jokes between them. They already knew his family, obviously. So I was definitely the outsider in my observations. And I don't think I could have joined other than to say, hi, I'm new and I'm trying to figure this out. Like, and I don't know if that would have been accepted, but it would have provided that social learning for me, if for no other reason than just exposure to, one, the professional, and two, the hobbyists that are there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Absolutely. Cheryl, do you want to go next?
Not really, but I will. I will say this, Marcia, you and I must think very similarly, because outside of our background, you and I both chose like this little woodblock looking thing for our presentation. So that tells me you're a Mac girl. Thank you. Okay, so first thing I'm going to start with will be my field notes. I'm going to share that with us first and talk about that for just a moment, because that was kind of the basis for my presentation. Then I'll show the presentation. And while I'm thinking about it, Marcia, your field notes were great. So
thanks. Yeah,
you really keyed in on some things. So I was like, oh yeah, that would have been cool to talk about. So that'll be the first thing I want to share with you is my field notes. And the thing I want to say about my field notes is this. I felt the pressure to have a postponed question for everything. And once I let go of that pressure, then I was okay. Then I could kind of enjoy what I was watching. You will see that there are some things in red, and I try to use a different color whenever it was something that surprised me. And I will talk about this in my presentation, was that there were moments of surprise in this, because I went in with, I think, with certain assumptions and maybe called biases, or certain thoughts that it was going to occur one way, some preconceptions that, that I thought would happen. But I thought it was the interesting thing. So, this was kind of where my field notes started. Then I'll jump into my presentation. So bear with me as I share that with you. And then I'm going to change it to presentation size. So on this, I have our research question that we kind of established, the making the Japanese wood block. And then some of my observations for the environment were obviously location setting, the tools. The biggest surprise that I thought whenever I was watching this was there was the microscope with the embedded camera, there was the laptop with the embedded camera, and then later on you would see, I think maybe at the end, there's somewhere where I saw we had a tripod with another camera set up on it. So you could get things from every angle. So he did have some technological awareness in how this was being presented and what his viewers wanted to see. The observations as far as what I saw from the streamer, a lot of the same things I'm sure you guys are going to have. The thing that really surprised me when I observed just him, so I watched it several times, were some of the jokes about his daughter, some of the very personal conversations that he was choosing to share with the people who were there in his room. I wasn't surprised that he plugged his personal Facebook page, or, you know, his assistant said donate to him and that kind of stuff. But he really became kind of alive whenever he talked. He was bragging about his grandsons. He was talking about his daughter's work ethic. The other thing that really surprised me was how the assistant must really be involved with him more than I thought, because he would answer questions to the viewers prior to ever reading them aloud to the artist, for the artist to give his take. So he already gave the information, and then the artist kind of reinforced that and elaborated that with his own personal thoughts. So, you know, those two aspects were, I thought, interesting aspects in interacting with the streamer. The interactions at the chat, it didn't really surprise me that there were emojis used. It really didn't surprise me that there was insider language. But the thing that did surprise me here was that there wasn't as much conversation between them whenever he started talking. So when Dave started talking, it was almost like them talking between themselves became an interruption. They got very quiet. They listened to what he had to say, and then the chat would resume. So I thought that was an interesting aspect of their chat. And, you know, I have these 5 things as far as the biggest surprises, and I've alluded to some of them as I've talked through them. But I will say the thing that surprised me the most was what I have listed as number 4, that he stated he didn't teach serious carvers. I would have gone into this thinking he was a serious carver because this is his job. But what I learned was, in his eyes, it seemed almost as if he views himself as a hobbyist, not as a serious carver, because he would always refer people who he thought were serious carvers to, oh, well, you really need to learn from this guy. You really need to learn, I think it was Doi-san, I think is who he kept referring to. So that was probably one of the biggest surprises for me about watching this, because I would have considered him to be a master. I'm not in the community, I'm just looking inward, but because he's hosting this website, I would have thought that he was a serious carver, but he doesn't teach serious carvers. And then my follow-up questions for Twitch. I think number 9 is probably the big one that I would want to answer if I could ask him. And that is, under what conditions or circumstances would you take on an intern or student since you do not teach serious carvers? Like, what would be the defining moment where we would say, yes, I'll teach you everything I know? Or does he see this technology as the ability to teach what he knows? Since he's not going to teach serious carvers, is he then hoping to use technology to teach amateur carvers and refer them on to serious carvers? Is he that, I don't know, that catalyst? You know, how does he view himself in that? And then my final one would be follow-up questions for the classmates. I have 3. Under what circumstances should one stop their working and interact directly with the chat? I think that's something to think about. How would you navigate the presence of virtual viewers in your private space? And what would be the criteria for interacting directly with the viewers? So I know that number 1 and number 3 sound similar, but I think number 1 changes based on certain things, you know, what's happening at the moment. If I'm busy and I'm engrossed, what would cause me to pause at that moment, break from whatever I'm doing, like he did with the grandsons chatting in. Family, all bets off kind of thing. So that's just kind of what I came away with from this presentation.
Great job, great observations. Yeah. I love how we've all done this so differently. And for me, whenever I see what you both have done, I'm always just like, okay, I gotta step it up a little bit if I can here.
I thought the same thing after looking at Marsha's when she started talking about the social. I was like, yes, absolutely. And man, she is really challenging me to kind of expand what I've done. So that's what I like about group work.
It's all different perspectives, right? That's the nice thing with group work. Yeah.
Yes.
Rich in good ways, exactly. All right, Devin, bring it home.
Yeah, so I'm going to kind of go through mine quickly because, again, we're going to be covering sort of the same bases, and I know we want to get to the next part of this project here. So for mine, same thing, kind of just an introduction here, our research question. Some things, first thing I noticed is I took way too many notes. Let me share my field notes as well with you here. So let me see, is this popping up here? So basically, like, this is my Excel spreadsheet. I have way too much. I actually went through and like transcribed a lot of it, just some real boneheaded things. And it took me forever to, let me go back to my presentation here. It took me forever once I had taken my notes to actually try to turn it into just key takeaways. So I'm not going to discuss all these bullet points because that makes me nauseous just looking at them here. But it was interesting when the stream first started, they acknowledged everyone, but they very quickly, Dave and Cameron, started talking about where they left off in the project. They were much more, as you both have mentioned, kind of talking with one another, keeping each other on track, rather than like as what I expected a host to do is say like, today we're working on this, and this is where we're at, and this is what the goal of the stream is going to be. I thought it was interesting as well that they have a couple commands built into chat where you could do like the repair command that would tell users in the chat everything about the common answers to what happens if things break or if there's any nicks or dings on your work there. Some other things too is I thought it was interesting the system that they have where I've seen streamers where they really do have to stop what they're doing and answer the stream or turn away and look at it, whereas Cameron really managed all of that for Dave. The other thing that was interesting is that there were those Skype tech issues that for like 5 minutes just seemed to derail the stream, and neither host really seemed interested in trying to keep things on track or keep it interesting and entertaining. It was very much like, this is what the stream is, and everyone who's a part of that stream, all the viewers, they understand that. Let's see, some other things too. Again, it pivoted to his family towards the end, and I did notice that's where Dave really perked up as well. And I think it was kind of interesting how dismissive and humble he was of his own talent, but you know, was really interested in other artists as well as his family. I also was surprised towards the end, and I'll address this in one of my future questions, that when they asked him how much his house cost, he actually like took the time to address it and said it was a complex answer and that they didn't have time to answer it. But very, very often outside of that, though, I thought it was interesting that Dave really didn't talk to the audience much. Besides saying hello and goodbye and addressing some specific questions, Cameron really was the audience kind of connection there. Some other things too, let's see. Yeah, it seemed like a lot of people on this stream, the viewers were either friends or family. I assume a lot of them were living in Japan, which was really different because I'm used to, my conception of what streaming would be is people from all over the world, mostly people that the host didn't know, whereas this was really, really familiar. Also, Cameron used those chat shortcuts to really answer questions and not derail Dave and their private conversation. So if there was something he could quickly answer, they had a lot of built-in commands that I thought were really helpful to get those questions out of the way but keep things moving. They also had kind of a master-apprentice relationship, even though I have to say, even looking on the website after I was done with this, I could not find out who Cameron really is, what he does there besides helping at the shop there. Other big thing is that sometimes the responses were delayed by like 30 seconds to a minute. And I've seen in both of your field notes, you have that down as well. And I thought that was interesting. It doesn't really seem like managing the audience or being really attentive was one of the primary concerns. It seemed like they were working at their shop and they also happened to be streaming here. Finally, I thought it was interesting too, in the chat, there's a whole different ecosystem where they're also providing, if Dave mentioned another print shop that was nearby, a couple users would post the actual URL. There were conversations within the actual chat between different viewers. Some of it was educating new viewers or newer viewers, and some of it was directing them to resources that tied into what Dave was saying. So it seems like the chat stepped up as well to kind of do some more of the heavy lifting and explanations that the host didn't. And then also, yeah, I thought it was interesting too. I think it was about 15 minutes into the stream that they first mentioned the Patreon donating, and through additional research after I was done, I kind of learned more about who they were and what was going on. But they really didn't, for new viewers, educate them at all about what the Patreon was about, what you had to donate. I felt kind of lost besides figuring out that if you donated enough, you got the wood blocks they were working on. Some of the questions that I had, are there any off-limit questions? What pertinent details should you offer the stream? Basically, should it come up naturally as it kind of did in the stream we watched? Or should they be periodically saying, okay, this is what I'm doing and this is what the wood is made of? because for us as 3 new viewers, they really didn't go out of their way to do that. And then same thing, how much is the acknowledgement of the chat? How useful is that to the streamer? I mean, do you really need to have an active participation with them, or can you just kind of do your own thing? In the sharing his life, did that also kind of ingratiate him with viewers there? I don't have to read all these, but the other last thing, though, I thought was interesting was how strictly monitored is the chat to prevent malicious links or comments. No one besides some of the sarcastic jokes, there was really no one in the chat trying to derail it. And I've seen, unfortunately, some articles where they have like video game streamers and people are using hate speech, or they're making fun of, they're trying to distract the streamer. Whereas in here, it seemed like everyone was kind of in harmony with that. Yeah, this is fine. Let's just choose one from this one. I really wondered, how do you maintain that concentration while you chat, you're working, you're also talking to your assistant, trying to split your attention 3 or 4 ways? I would really love to know how these people that are at they're masters of their discipline, how they manage to kind of do that. Now, the questions, part of the assignment we had mentioned about how do we take these questions and refine them to ask classmates. So we have a lot of teachers in our class. So how does your behavior or work change when you're being observed, whether it's by students, whether it's by fellow faculty members, or just other staff members if you're in a non-educational setting? What level of detail and honesty is most helpful for your work environment? How do you engage deeply with your audience without overstepping? And then how much preparation do you need to fully engage? So these were some things that I thought about that kind of popped up. I did not have a lot of, the last thing is how does this whole assignment refine my original research question? And that is something that I'm still thinking about and working on. I'm not really sure how this is going to tie in, except for in the very abstract sense. So that was, let me stop this. That was my share. So where are we at in terms of the rest of this project? I think, let's see. So have either of you sort of, I think you've done it, Cheryl, Marcia, have you thought about refining these questions into what we'd ask our classmates at all?
You know, that I'm really struggling with that, because so it's supposed to go back to our original research questions that prior to this, right?
Yeah, I think there's 2 parts to it. One is going to go back to our research question, and then for the mini project 4 assignment, we're going to have to ask another classmate some questions. So I think there's 2 different things that we're going to have to do, one for our own research and one for our classmates.
Okay.
That's what I took away from it. I don't know if I'm right or not.
Yeah, I've been, like I said, I've read that like so many times trying to figure out exactly what the next, I know we have to come up with the interview protocol, the interview questions, but do those interview questions relate to the mini project 3, or do they relate back to our original research question? Yeah,
that's a good question. Cheryl, do you know it all, or?
I don't know. And whenever I've talked to the professor about different aspects of this class, I find very confusing. Unfortunately, she's also confused by it. So she says, ask questions, because this whole course was written by a different professor, and our professor is in the middle of rewriting it for the next time it's going to be taught. So anything that we're confused by, let her know, because that kind of helps her figure out where points are that need to be raised. So that might be a good question for us to ask her in clarification.
Absolutely.
Because the one thing we don't get in this class that I've gotten in other classes is like an introductory email saying, this is what you should be expecting from this. And it kind of clarifies those roadblocks for the reader. So it clarifies what information may be confusing about the lesson coming up, and she just may not know that. That's the impression I get. So I think she's an awesome professor, because she will take whatever time we need to understand that, and she's had to take some time with me to help me understand that. Absolutely. So I think if we ask her that, she will gladly clarify for us.
Okay.
Going back to the question, one thing that came out to me, and I think this would be a good question maybe for classmates, is, how do you determine what environment you're going to host? Is it going to be a fly on the wall? Because I kind of got the impression from this one that we just watched, it was more of like a fly on the wall, watching someone who is experienced, versus a hosted stream. So in my mind, those are like two different things. One's almost like a talk show, and one of those is I'm a voyeur. So, you know, how do you navigate the space between those two extremes? How do you determine the hybrid of that? So I'm not sure how that would work into a question, but that's kind of, as I listened to you guys talk and thought about your observations, I was reading through your slides, that's one of the things that I was coming up with, because determining your environment determines a lot of these other questions that we have.
Absolutely. Yeah, and even just how did they choose that specific environment? How did they even figure out what cameras should be set up? All of those, the nuts and bolts of it really fascinate me, and I don't even know. Like, was it something where like Dave's not, he doesn't really like engaging in the chat, or is that what Cameron's job is, or I really have no idea.
Yeah, determining the streaming environment, not the platform that it's served on, but the streaming environment that the viewer sees.
Mm-hmm.
I think determining that and how that interaction is treated, handled, addressed.
Right, because it could change the whole perception of that stream, you know, and the whole outcome. Yeah.
And I also wonder if culture had played a part of this, because it's obvious he's in Japan. So does cultural attitude adjust that environment? Because I can't imagine that watching someone do a job, because he was very deferential to this Doi-san, you know, how does that play for people who are watching him? Is it common in Japan to do like a fly on the wall versus, you know, a hosted talk show version? Were we treated in the same respect that someone who was a local student or someone, a local hobbyist, would be treated in Japan? So I wonder how much culture impacts on something that you're broadcasting globally. Is there a way to compensate or account for that?
And I wondered, I mean, this just tying into what I was thinking about with like the social aspect of things, I wonder if the culture really played into effect, like you said, the whole stream kind of changed when he talked about his grandsons and his family and that whole interaction of that. So does culture affect that as well, you know?
I think I didn't even think of that or consider that. Yeah, I think culture is a huge thing for this stream, because the ones I've seen, if you're watching ones where maybe the streamer is younger or the content skews younger, your chat's younger, it's filled with maybe less maturity, or in terms of this, it seemed like the chat wasn't huge, but everyone was very respectful. Everyone understood what was going on. I think there was a lot, I would think culture would account for a good portion of that at least.
So I'm going to put these in our, just so forgive the misspellings, just in the little chat off the side, you'll see I'm just, the two things that we've talked about, the culture and the hosting environment, I'm just going to drop those in our chat right quick.
And I'll attach these with the rest of the recording when we're done here. I'm going to bring up some of the future mini projects and just see if there's any other information that we might need to know or keep in mind.
Now, I know we will probably have to work with other groups these last few weeks of our class, but if we do, I'm going to be sad, because I've really enjoyed working with you guys. You guys have been an awesome team, very responsive and engaged, and I thank you for that.
And I appreciate you both, because I have been in some groups in some of the other classes that have been so frustrating. So you guys, and I feel like I was lagging a little bit with responses, you know. You guys were boom, boom, boom. Like the one day my phone, I'm like, I got to get to that, you know. So I appreciate both of you very much.
Absolutely. I'm barely keeping it together at this point. So this has been a good group. I've had some where I've messaged people and you've had to do most of it solo and everything else. So this has been good. I feel like we're all on the same page for the most part with what we need to do, and everything looks good. I think we're all on the right track. Now, is there anything else? I was looking at some of the mini projects, and really part 4 or number 4 is pretty different. It is more of like these open-ended questions and doing interviews. Is there anything else for this chat that anyone wants to add or contribute to, or anything you think we missed?
Let me take a look here.
Hey, we've been upgraded by the host. Thank you, host.
You know, like I said, and I think like one of the follow-up questions, because I know I didn't really include a whole lot in my presentation, but definitely even from like the streamer's point of view, how they feel the social interaction affects the learning. Because this was my first experience with Twitch or streaming, any type of streaming. And so I was pretty amazed of the social interaction going on, you know, between the helper and the chat, and then also in the people in the chat. So I guess from a streamer's perspective, how do they feel that, you know, the social learning affects, you know, how does the social interaction affect the learning?
That's a good point too, because at least in this video, they never directly address it. Like I have no idea how they feel about the stream or the viewers or anything like that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it's a great way to get like Patreon funds or donations or whatever, but like, you know, does it actively kind of break their concentration or affect their work at all?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, is it distracting to them? You know, when, you know, although what was his name, Cameron, he didn't really, when there was a lot of side chatter going on, he didn't really acknowledge a whole lot of it either.
No, he didn't.
You know?
Yeah. Okay, I'm putting all these questions down as well, Cheryl.
I think I captured the 3 that we were looking at. Now, Devin, here's one going back to perspective. When you were talking about the chat bot that was on there, see, I thought that was someone's name, like, you know, Vivid or whatever his name was. When you said it was a chat bot, I was like, oh, that was AI chat bot. See, I thought that was that as like, you know, I'm going to do the little robot avatar and I'm going to be Mrs. Chatbot kind of thing. So that difference in perspective, hearing you say that, I was very intrigued. I was like, how does one even get a chatbot to interact in their Twitch feed? Like that spun me off on several questions just from a technical aspect.
Yeah, it's interesting because it seems like they would use these simple commands like that exclamation mark repair, and then it would spit out like 3 different, you know, pieces of information about like how they repair things. But yeah, that level of either preparedness or maybe they've been exposed to these questions over and over again. But yeah, how that worked. And I think someone else in the chat also used a command and it did stuff. So like, and for us, I didn't see anything where it explained how that worked or, so that level of insider knowledge on not just how Twitch works, but what commands you can use. I would be interested to know where that information is and how you learn it.
Right. Yeah. And so somebody just walking into that chat like us, like, how do you even have access to any of that information? Yeah.
Exactly. Okay. Anything else?
So that's a good question. I'm going to pop up on here right quick. How do new viewers become inculcated? I mean, because you have to really be inculcated into that streaming environment because we weren't cued in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's like you're watching a new or a different culture, and you're outside of it, and we're studying it as researchers here, and it does feel like a whole different world that somehow has developed without my knowledge at all.
I'm misspelling terribly because I was raised in rural North Carolina during the 70s when they were teaching us phonetics. And you can't tell a girl that goes hunting how to spell hunting correctly. So I apologize for my spelling in advance, guys.
That's okay. Where I grew up, we call creeks cricks. So everyone's got their own little thing here.
Again, I appreciate your kindness and compassion.
So what I'll do is, once we're done, I'll do the same thing that you did last time, Cheryl, where I'll take some screenshots, send them through text once it's uploaded, and we should be good to go.
Okay. Are we missing anything that we are supposed to provide to her through this? I don't think so, but I just want to ask the question as a summary. I want to make sure I provide everything to you guys.
Right. I mean, we worked as a group. We have some general interview questions for somebody on Twitch, and then we're supposed to just take those and modify them to ask somebody in class, right?
Yeah.
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Yay.
Well, we nailed it. We did it.
Good job, team.
Great
job. And thank you for challenging me. Always, you guys offer awesome insight that really gets me to thinking. So thank you for doing that. It takes a little bit of vulnerability to do that with teammates. When you're not certain if you're doing the right thing, to put your stuff out there to someone else. So thank you guys for taking that leap with me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for keeping us on our toes. And, this is the only reason why I'm doing work this early on a Saturday. I'd be in comfy pants on a couch passed out or something. So you are actually making my brain work. So I appreciate that. But so yeah, once we stop the recording and we're done here, then I will let you know when it's uploaded and we'll be good to go.
Thank you.
Sounds
Thank you,
great.
Marsha.
Thank you, guys.
Okay, thank you, Devin, for taking the lead on this part. I really appreciate that. My upload stream is off.
Yeah, no. Now tell me this: did you just hit stop recording when you were done, and it would start doing its thing? Okay.
You hit stop record, and then it tells you kind of in the next steps. And I downloaded the file that they gave me so I could then upload it to YouTube, which was going to take like 14 hours. Faster to upload it to Google for me at that time.
Okay.
So depending on whatever platform you want to upload it to, they'll let you do that.
Okay,
so
awesome.
Very easy.
Okay, then I'll stop it now here, and thank you both so much. Enjoy your weekends. I hope they're good.
You guys do too.
You as well. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.